At midnight, in a ballroom blazing with candlelight, Miss Eliza Harcourt did the most improper thing a respectable young woman of 1821 could possibly do. She seized a stranger by the hand, not a cousin, not a family friend, not even a gentleman to whom she had been properly introduced, a stranger. And before anyone could stop her, before the man she had once promised to marry could reach her through the crowded room, Eliza looked up into the stranger's startled gray eyes and said, in a voice scarcely louder than a breath, "Sir, if you possess one grain of mercy, you must pretend to know me." The gentleman's gaze shifted over her shoulder. He saw what she had seen. Captain Edmund Vale was coming toward them. And the stranger smiled. Not kindly, perhaps, not at first, but with the dangerous, deliberate calm of a man who had just decided to intervene. "My dear Miss Harcourt," he said, as though they had shared 100 afternoons together, "you are late for our dance." Then he drew her into his arms, and Eliza had no idea that the man holding her so securely beneath the chandeliers was not merely some handsome guest at Lady Pembroke's winter ball. She had just thrown herself into the protection of Julian Ashford, the Duke of Wycliffe. Now, if you have ever wished to disappear from a room where everyone seemed to be watching, then perhaps you understand why Eliza did not notice the subtle stir that passed through the nearest cluster of guests. She did not notice the whispered name, Wycliffe. She noticed only Captain Vale. His face had hardened. His hand, extended toward her a moment before, dropped slowly to his side. And in that small, perfect space between one turn of the dance and the next, Eliza felt something she had not felt in 2 years. Fear. Not the foolish, fluttering anxiety of a girl about to be presented at court. Not the ordinary embarrassment of saying the wrong thing at supper. This was colder than that. It was the fear of remembering what a man had once promised you in private, and realizing that he still believed those promises gave him power. "You have not answered my letter," Captain Vale said. The music continued around them. Violins sighed. Slippers brushed the polished floor. Someone laughed too loudly near the card room. Yet to Eliza, his voice was the only sound she could hear. She lifted her chin. "I did not believe an answer was required." A lady does not simply break an engagement and then refuse discussion. A gentleman does not require discussion after his conduct has made an engagement impossible. His eyes narrowed. Captain Edmund Vale was not a loud man. That had been one of the reasons Eliza's aunt had once praised him so highly. He did not drink excessively. He did not gamble recklessly. He did not shout in drawing rooms or chase actresses through London. No, Captain Vale was far more respectable than that. He was controlled. He was patient. And when he wanted something, he made the people around him feel unreasonable for denying it. "You misunderstand me," he said softly. "I came this evening in the hope that we might repair matters." Eliza's fingers tightened against the Duke's shoulder. The stranger, Wycliffe, though she did not yet know it, felt the change in her. His hand at her waist shifted, not possessively, but protectively. It was a subtle movement. So subtle that anyone watching might have thought it merely part of the dance. But Eliza understood. He had understood too. "We are dancing, Vale," he said. It was the first time the stranger had addressed the captain directly. His voice was low and pleasant, yet something in it made Captain Vale step back. "Of course," the captain replied. "I should not wish to interrupt." "No," said the Duke. "You should not." Captain Vale inclined his head, but his gaze never left Eliza's face. "I will speak with you soon." Then he turned and vanished into the glittering crush of silk, black coats, and candlelight. For 3 more measures, Eliza danced in silence. She had the absurd awareness that she had not even thanked the gentleman who had rescued her. Worse, she had not asked his name. Her cheeks burned as she realized that she was being held by a complete stranger in the middle of one of the grandest ballrooms in London. "I am afraid," she said at last, "that I have behaved with shocking presumption." Perhaps. The answer was dry enough that, despite herself, Eliza looked up. He was older than Captain Vale by several years, perhaps 33. His dark hair was neatly arranged, though one lock had escaped near his temple. His face was composed, handsome in a serious fashion, with a mouth that appeared more accustomed to restraint than smiles. But his eyes were not cold. They were watching her with a concern he was trying not to show. "You have my gratitude, sir," she said. "You may save it until I have earned it." "I fear you have already earned a great deal." The music carried them farther from the spot where Captain Vale had confronted her. The Duke guided her through the steps with effortless precision. Eliza was a capable dancer, but tonight her thoughts were scattered like frightened birds. "May I ask," he said quietly, "whether you are in danger?" The question caught her by surprise, not because it was dramatic, not because he spoke with great alarm, but because no one had asked her so plainly before. Her aunt had said, "Captain Vale has an unfortunate temper, but all men do, my dear." Her brother had said, "You must not make a scandal of a private disagreement." Her former fiancé himself had said, "Eliza, you are too sensitive. You imagine cruelties where none exist." For 2 years, everyone had asked whether she might forgive him. No one had asked whether she was safe from him. "I do not know," she admitted. The Duke's expression changed almost imperceptibly. "Then you should not leave this room alone." Eliza gave a small, humorless laugh. "I assure you, I am not usually in the habit of accepting instruction from gentlemen I have only just accosted." "An admirable habit, and yet you say I should not leave alone." "I do." "Why?" The Duke's gaze met hers. "Because you were frightened before he spoke," he said, "and you became more frightened afterward." For a moment, Eliza could not reply. The dance ended. All around them, couples separated, ladies curtsied, gentlemen bowed. The spell of movement broke. Reality pressed in once more. The Duke did not immediately release her hand. "Where is your chaperone?" he asked. "My aunt is somewhere near the refreshment room, no doubt discussing the Prince Regent's waistcoat with someone who has never met him." "Then allow me to escort you to her." "That is very kind. But I cannot continue to impose upon—" "Eliza!" A woman's voice cut brightly through the room. Mrs. Beatrice Harcourt, Eliza's aunt, was approaching in violet silk, looking flustered and delighted all at once. She was accompanied by Lady Pembroke, the hostess, who wore diamonds enough to finance a small war. "There you are," Aunt Beatrice said. "I have searched everywhere. Lady Pembroke tells me you have been dancing with—" She stopped. Her eyes widened. Lady Pembroke's smile became one of enormous satisfaction. "Mrs. Harcourt," said the Duke, bowing, "your niece was kind enough to grant me this dance." Aunt Beatrice blinked once, then twice. "Your Grace," she whispered. Eliza looked from her aunt to the man beside her, the man whose hand she was still holding. "Your Grace." Oh. There are moments when a person feels the entire shape of her life alter, not with thunder or grand announcement, but with one dreadful little word. Eliza dropped her hand as though it had caught fire. The Duke of Wycliffe. Of course he was. Everyone in London knew of Julian Ashford, though he had spent much of the past decade abroad and was rarely seen in society. He was one of the richest men in England, owner of vast estates in Derbyshire and Northumberland, a duke before the age of 30, and, according to every unmarried mother with a daughter over 17, the most eligible gentleman in the kingdom. He was also rumored to be proud, austere, difficult, and wholly uninterested in marriage. Eliza, who had never met him, had imagined him as a remote figure in a portrait gallery, a man with a severe face and an even more severe income. She had not imagined him smiling down at her, as though her desperation had amused him. "Your Grace," she said faintly, and curtsied. He bowed. "Miss Harcourt." Aunt Beatrice looked ready to swoon. Lady Pembroke, who missed nothing, gave Eliza a knowing glance that made Eliza wish the floor might open beneath her slippers. "Well," Lady Pembroke said, "I am delighted. Wycliffe has been avoiding every eligible lady in London since his arrival, but perhaps he merely required the right invitation." "Lady Pembroke," the Duke said. The hostess laughed. "Do not glare at me, Your Grace. I have known you since you were 12, and I remember quite clearly when you put a frog in your father's boot."
"I was 11.
"Ah, then that excuses it entirely." To Eliza's surprise, the Duke's stern mouth almost smiled. And then, beyond his shoulder, she saw Captain Vale again. He was standing near one of the marble columns, watching. His expression was not angry. That would have been easier. He looked certain, as if whatever had just happened, whatever protection the Duke's presence seemed to offer, was only a temporary inconvenience. Eliza's stomach turned. The Duke followed her gaze. For one brief second, his expression became still. Then he turned back to Aunt Beatrice. "Mrs. Harcourt," he said, "if Miss Harcourt permits it, I should like to call tomorrow." Aunt Beatrice made a sound, suspiciously, like a squeak. Eliza stared at him. He did not look at her, not immediately, but when he did, his eyes held hers. It was not a question that could be answered safely in a ballroom, not with Lady Pembroke listening, not with Captain Vale watching from across the room. It was a promise. "I see what is happening, and I will not leave you to face it alone." So Eliza said the only thing she could, "Yes, Your Grace." The following morning, the Harcourt townhouse in Bloomsbury was in chaos. Aunt Beatrice had ordered fresh flowers for the drawing room, instructed the cook to prepare cakes, despite the fact that it was not yet noon, and sent a footman to polish the silver twice. "Eliza," she said for the 4th time, "do sit still. You are making me nervous. I am not moving. You are tapping your foot. I am attempting to prevent myself from being sick." Aunt Beatrice paused, her hands full of ribbon. "My dear," she said more gently, "the Duke of Wycliffe does not make young ladies sick. He may not, but the prospect of being questioned by a duke about one's humiliating conduct at a ball certainly does." He did not look humiliated. No, that was part of the difficulty. Aunt Beatrice sat beside her on the settee. For all her fluttering ways, Beatrice Harcourt loved Eliza deeply. She had raised her after Eliza's mother died, and although she cared far too much for fashion and the opinions of other people, she had never lacked affection. "You need not tell him anything you do not wish to tell him," she said. Eliza looked down at her clasped hands. "I know. And Captain Vale has no right to trouble you. I know that too. Then why do you look as though the world is ending? Because knowing something and believing it were not the same. Because Captain Vale had spent 2 years teaching her to doubt every instinct she possessed. Because a broken engagement was not a simple thing for a woman. It was whispered about, examined, judged. It could stain a reputation, narrow every future, make even beloved relatives look at her with quiet concern. And because Eliza had not told Aunt Beatrice everything, she had not told her about the night Captain Vale had caught her wrist so tightly that bruises bloomed there the next morning. She had not told her how he had read her letters before their marriage, deciding which friends were suitable and which were not. She had not told her about the cold, smiling way he had explained that once they were married, she would find it easier to obey. At the time, Eliza had been 20. At the time, she had told herself that love must not look like fear. So she had ended the engagement, and Captain Vale had never forgiven her for it. The door opened. The butler announced, "His Grace, the Duke of Wycliffe." Julian Ashford entered the room alone. Today he wore a dark blue coat, immaculate linen, and an expression that suggested he had spent the journey from his own home thinking very carefully. He bowed to Aunt Beatrice, then to Eliza. "Mrs. Harcourt." "Miss Harcourt." "Your Grace," Aunt Beatrice said, rising. "May I offer you tea?" "Thank you, but no." Aunt Beatrice looked faintly disappointed. The cook's cakes, apparently, would go unappreciated. Julian turned to Eliza. "I hope you will forgive my directness," he said. "I did not come to discuss the ball." "Then why did you come?" "To ask whether Captain Vale has threatened you." Aunt Beatrice went still. Eliza felt the room sharpen around her. The ticking clock, the faint rattle of carriage wheels in the street, the scent of roses beginning to wilt in their vase. "He has not threatened me," she said. Julian's gaze did not move from hers. "Has he frightened you?" "Yes." The answer came out before she could stop it. Aunt Beatrice sat down slowly. Julian did not look triumphant. He did not look satisfied at having extracted some confession. He looked angry, not at her, for her. It was a distinction Eliza had almost forgotten was possible. "What has he done?" he asked. She wanted to say nothing. She wanted to preserve the last scraps of privacy she possessed. But something in the Duke's manner made silence feel less like strength and more like surrender, so she told them. Not everything, not at first, but enough. She described the arguments that had begun as disagreements about household matters and ended with Captain Vale informing her that she was childish. She spoke of the letters he had demanded to see, the friendships he had dismissed, the way he had insisted that a wife's happiness came from yielding gracefully to her husband's judgment. Then she showed them the faint scar at the inside of her wrist. It was small, nearly invisible, but Aunt Beatrice began to cry. Julian did not speak for a long while. Finally, he said, "Why did no one stop him?" Eliza gave a brittle smile. "Because he was always careful not to behave badly when anyone important was watching." "That does not answer my question. It is the only answer I have." Julian's jaw tightened. "Captain Vale's regiment is posted in Kent, is it not? He is on leave. His leave ends in 3 days. Eliza watched him, suddenly wary. "What do you intend to do?" "Nothing reckless." That sounds very much like something a man says before doing something reckless. A fleeting warmth entered his eyes. "I intend to ensure he returns to his regiment." "How?" "Through methods which do not require your concern." "Your Grace, I appreciate your kindness, but I cannot permit you to involve yourself in this." "You cannot permit me. I mean, I know what you mean." He took a breath. "Miss Harcourt, last night you trusted me without knowing my name. I do not take that lightly. I did not trust you. I was desperate." "Desperation does not make a woman foolish." The words landed softly, but they struck somewhere deep. Eliza looked away. For 2 years, she had wondered whether ending her engagement had been foolish, whether she had overreacted, whether she had destroyed her own prospects by refusing to be patient. And here was this impossible Duke telling her, in the calmest voice imaginable, that desperation did not make her foolish. Aunt Beatrice dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. "Your Grace," she said, "I believe Captain Vale intends to call this afternoon." Julian turned toward her. "Then he will not find Miss Harcourt unaccompanied." Eliza stared at him. "You cannot stay here all day." "No," he said, "but I can arrange for you and Mrs. Harcourt to spend the afternoon at my aunt's house in Berkeley Square." "Your aunt?" "Lady Eleanor Ashford. She is 80, formidable, and has frightened every man in our family for 3 generations." Despite everything, Eliza laughed. Julian's expression softened. "There," he said quietly, "that is preferable." Lady Eleanor Ashford was indeed formidable. She had silver hair, sharp dark eyes, and the posture of a queen, considering the fate of a troublesome province. She received Eliza and Aunt Beatrice in a drawing room of pale green silk, and declared, within 5 minutes, that Eliza was too thin, Aunt Beatrice had excellent taste in bonnets, and Julian had inherited his father's habit of taking too long to act when a woman was in distress. "Aunt," Julian said, "do not aunt me, boy. You know perfectly well I am right." Eliza nearly choked on her tea. Lady Eleanor looked at her over the rim of her cup. "Do not be alarmed, Miss Harcourt. My nephew is an excellent man, though he tries very hard to look like a tragic Roman statue." Julian closed his eyes briefly. "Would you excuse me?" he asked. "I must speak to my steward." "Go," Lady Eleanor said, "and when you return, try to remember you are in a house, not a mausoleum." When he had gone, Lady Eleanor leaned toward Eliza. "You need not tell me anything you do not wish to," she said, echoing Aunt Beatrice's words from earlier. "But I should like you to know that Julian is not helping you because he thinks you are helpless." Eliza looked up. "He is helping you because he recognizes the look of someone who has been made to feel alone." How could he recognize that? Lady Eleanor's face changed. Not much, but enough. "His mother died when he was 16, she said. "His father was a hard man, a powerful man, the sort who believed affection weakened a boy and obedience made him strong. Julian survived him, inherited everything, and spent years convincing himself that needing anyone was a danger." Eliza glanced toward the closed door. "He does not seem like a man who needs anyone." "No," Lady Eleanor said softly. "That is his tragedy." Over the next week, Julian became an unexpected presence in Eliza's life. Not constantly, not improperly. He did not arrive at her house every morning with declarations and bouquets. He did not treat her as a fragile creature in need of rescuing from every shadow. Instead, he appeared with practical information. Captain Vale had returned to Kent. Captain Vale's request for extended leave had been denied. Captain Vale had sent a letter, which Julian had advised Eliza not to answer. Then, when Eliza asked why she should listen to his advice, Julian said, "You should not, unless it agrees with your own judgment." No one had ever said such a thing to her before. One afternoon, she found him in the library of Lady Eleanor's home, standing beside a tall window with a letter in his hand. "You are becoming very familiar with this house," he remarked. "So are you. I was born here." "Then you have the advantage." "I do not think I do." The answer was so quiet that she looked at him. Outside, rain patterned the glass. The room smelled of leather bindings and the faint smoke of a dying fire. Julian set the letter aside. "Have you decided what you will do now?" he asked. Eliza knew what he meant. What would she do with her life now that she was not to marry Captain Vale? What would she do with the future that had been planned for her, then taken apart by her own hand? "I have considered becoming a governess," she said. Julian frowned. Why? Because I am educated. I speak French tolerably well, and I have some skill with music. That does not answer my question, she smiled sadly. You are rather fond of asking questions that people cannot evade. I have found evasion rarely improves an answer. I must do something useful. Are you not useful now? I am 26, dependent upon my aunt, and known in polite society as the woman who broke an engagement to a respectable army officer. Julian's face darkened. You are known to polite society for precisely as long as polite society finds the matter interesting. That may be true for you. Dukes are allowed to outlive gossip. Men are allowed to outlive gossip, he said. It is not the same thing. Eliza was silent. He understood, more than she had expected. Julian crossed to the desk and opened a drawer. From it, he withdrew several sheets of paper. My estate in Derbyshire has a school, he said. A small one, for the children of tenants and labourers. It is poorly managed. The mistress is retiring. Eliza stared at him. Are you offering me employment? I am asking whether you might consider it. You would have me teach at your estate? If it is what you want, and if it is not, then I will think of something else. She looked at the papers in his hand, but did not take them. Why are you doing this? Julian's gaze held hers. Because you said you wished to be useful. That cannot be the only reason. No, the rain whispered against the windows. He seemed about to say more. Eliza could feel it, the words gathering in the silence between them. Then the library door opened. A footman entered, pale-faced. Your Grace, he said, there is a gentleman below, Captain Vale. For a moment, Eliza could not breathe. Julian turned toward the servant. He was told Miss Harcourt was not receiving visitors. Yes, Your Grace, but he insists he must speak with her. He says it concerns a matter of great urgency. Eliza stood. No. Julian's eyes moved to her. No, she repeated, though her voice trembled. I will not see him. Then you will not. The footman bowed and withdrew, but a minute later, raised voices drifted from the hall. Captain Vale was not shouting. Of course he was not. He was speaking with the offended dignity of a man convinced that everyone around him was behaving irrationally. Eliza heard her name. Then Julian moved toward the door. Do not, she said. He stopped. I need to speak to him, she said, more firmly this time. You do not. I do. Miss Harcourt, if you send him away without allowing me to face him, he will continue to believe he has power over me. She swallowed. And perhaps part of me will continue to believe it too. Julian looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Very well. He offered his arm. I will be beside you. Captain Vale stood in Lady Eleanor's entrance hall beneath the great portrait of the first Duke of Wycliffe. He looked immaculate in his dark green coat, his blonde hair neatly combed, his expression carefully controlled. When he saw Eliza, relief spread across his face. There you are, he said. I feared they had hidden you from me. Eliza descended the final stair. Julian remained one step behind her. Captain Vale's gaze flicked to him and cooled. I asked for a private conversation. And I declined, Eliza said. You cannot mean to continue this absurdity. What absurdity? This performance. This pretense that I have wronged you so deeply. He looked at Julian again. I see you have found an influential protector. Is that it? You seek to make me jealous? Eliza felt something inside her recoil. Once, those words would have confused her. She would have wondered if perhaps he was right. If perhaps she had behaved melodramatically. If perhaps she had sought attention without meaning to. But now she saw it. The cruelty was not in the volume of his voice. It was in the certainty that he could define her reality for her. "No," she said. Captain Vale's expression hardened. "No? No, Edmund. I do not seek to make you jealous. I do not seek anything from you. You had an engagement. I ended it. You had no right." The hall seemed to go very quiet. Even Julian did not move. Eliza looked directly at the man she had once intended to marry. "I had every right." Captain Vale stepped closer. "You think a duke can shield you from consequence? You think he will marry you, perhaps? Is that the fantasy?" Julian's face became unreadable. Eliza's heart pounded painfully, but she did not look away. "I do not need the Duke of Wycliffe to marry me," she said. "I do not need any man to rescue me. I need you to understand that you will never again tell me what I am allowed to do." For the first time, Captain Vale looked uncertain. Only slightly, but it was there. "You will regret this," he said. "Perhaps," Eliza replied, "but I would rather regret freedom than live in fear." Captain Vale's mouth tightened. Then he did something he had done countless times before. He smiled. A small, smooth, contemptuous smile. "You are making a mistake." "No," said Julian from behind her. "She has merely stopped making yours." Captain Vale looked at him. The Duke stepped forward at last, his manner calm and cold. "You will leave this house," Julian said. "You will not write to Miss Harcourt. You will not call upon her. You will not approach her in public. If you do, I will ensure every officer above you in rank is informed of the exact nature of your conduct." Captain Vale's color drained. "You have no proof." Julian's eyes did not blink. "Do you wish to test that?" There was a long silence. Then Captain Vale bowed, not to Eliza, but to Julian. "Your Grace." He turned and left. The door closed behind him. Eliza remained standing in the hall, unable to move. Julian did not touch her. That was perhaps the greatest kindness of all. He simply waited. At last, she let out a breath that shook from her shoulders to her hands. "He will be angry," she whispered. "Yes. He may tell people stories about me. Yes. He may say I was unfaithful or unstable, or that I encouraged him." Julian's voice gentled. "He may." She looked at him, stricken. "That does not help." "No," he said, "but I will not lie to you simply to make you feel safe for an hour." Something in her broke then, not loudly, no tears at first, just the unbearable ache of being believed. Julian moved closer, slowly enough that she could have stepped away. "People may speak," he said, "but they do not get to decide the truth of your life, Eliza." It was the first time he had called her by her given name. Her eyes filled. "And if they do?" she asked. "If they decide I am ruined, then they are fools." A watery laugh escaped her. "You make it sound very simple." "It is simple," Julian said. "It is not easy." She looked up at him. He had spent his life surrounded by power, by titles, wealth, deference, all the protections that had never been offered to her. Yet he did not use those things to make himself important. He used them to make room for her to stand. And perhaps that was when Eliza began to love him, not because he was a duke, not because he had rescued her in a ballroom, but because, when she was afraid, he never demanded that she become less afraid for his comfort. He simply stood beside her until she remembered her own courage. Spring came late that year. By April, the hedgerows of Derbyshire were bright with new green, and the schoolhouse at Wycliffe Hall smelled of fresh plaster, ink, and the faint sweetness of apple blossoms drifting through the open windows. Eliza had accepted the position. At first, Aunt Beatrice had protested that living so far from London would be lonely. Then Lady Eleanor had announced that she herself intended to spend the summer at Wycliffe Hall, and required Eliza's assistance in selecting new curtains for the east wing. This was, everyone understood, a transparent excuse. But it was a loving one. The school had 12 children when Eliza arrived. Within a month, it had 23. She taught them their letters, their sums, their maps, and the small, precious skill of believing that a world might exist beyond the boundaries they had been given. Julian visited often. At first, he came to inspect the repairs, then to discuss supplies, then to deliver books from the library. Eventually, he stopped pretending there was a reason. He would stand at the back of the classroom while Eliza read aloud, his tall figure awkwardly folded into a chair designed for a child. The pupils adored him, though they were slightly afraid of him at first. One little boy, named Thomas, asked whether a duke was allowed to eat treacle pudding. Julian replied that he had never encountered a law against it. Thomas considered this. "Then why do you look unhappy when you eat it?" "I do not. You do." Eliza had to turn away to hide her laughter. On warm evenings, Julian and Eliza walked through the estate gardens. They spoke of books, of the school, of the tenants' harvest prospects. They spoke of Lady Eleanor's endless campaign to find Julian a wife. They did not speak of love, not directly. Perhaps both were afraid that naming it might undo it. Then, in early June, a letter arrived from London. Captain Vale had been transferred overseas. There had been an incident involving gambling debts and an accusation of conduct unbecoming an officer. No details were included, though Julian's expression suggested he knew more than he intended to say. Eliza read the letter twice. Then she folded it carefully and placed it in the fire. Julian watched the paper darken at the edges. "Are you all right?" he asked. She considered the question. The flames curled around Captain Vale's name until it vanished. "Yes," she said. And for the first time, it was true. That night, rain began after dinner. Not a storm, but a soft summer rain that silvered the windows and turned the gardens into shadows. Eliza could not sleep. She went downstairs to the small schoolroom, intending to sort the lessons for the next day. Instead, she found Julian there. He stood beside the window, looking out into the dark. "You are awake," she said. "So are you. I had work to do." "Of course," she smiled. "And you?" "I had thinking to do." "That sounds far more dangerous." "It has been." He turned toward her. The room was lit only by the low fire and a single lamp on the desk. In that gentle light, the Duke looked less like a duke than he ever had before. Less distant, more vulnerable. "Eliza," he said. Her heart began to race. "I have spent most of my life believing that affection was a weakness, that to love someone was to hand them the means of hurting you." She did not speak. Julian came closer. "I was wrong." The rain whispered against the glass. "I cannot promise you that I will always know the right thing to say," he continued. "I cannot promise that I will not make mistakes. I have made rather a great many already. You have not made many with me." "No," he said softly, "because with you I have wanted to be better than I am." Eliza's eyes filled with tears. He reached for her hand, then paused before touching it. "May I?" Such a small question, 3 little words. But Eliza understood what they meant. "May I come closer? May I share your life? May I love you without taking anything from you?" She placed her hand in his. "Yes." His fingers closed around hers. Warm, steady, careful. "I love you," Julian said. "Not because you need me. Not because I wish to save you. I love you because you are brave when you are frightened. Because you see kindness where others overlook it. Because you walked into my life in a ballroom, took my hand, and trusted me with a courage you did not even know you possessed. Eliza laughed through her tears. "I did not trust you. You have told me. I thought you were simply the nearest gentleman, an excellent distinction." She stepped closer. "And I love you," she whispered, "though I did not mean to, though I tried very hard not to." Julian smiled then, not the guarded, rare smile of the Duke of Wycliffe, but the smile of a man who had waited too long to be happy. When he kissed her, it was not like a claim, it was like a question answered. And later, when London learned that the Duke of Wycliffe intended to marry Miss Eliza Harcourt, there was, naturally, gossip. There were whispers in drawing rooms. There were raised brows over tea. There were women who declared that no duke married a woman with a broken engagement unless there was something very suspicious in it. But there were also other stories, stories of the new school at Wycliffe Hall, stories of the Duchess-to-be, who knew the names of tenant children and listened when their mothers spoke, stories of a duke who had become unexpectedly social, unexpectedly warm, and entirely devoted to the woman who had once grabbed him in a crowded ballroom and asked him to pretend. And perhaps, dear listener, that is the thing to remember. Eliza did not find happiness because a duke rescued her. She found it because, in the moment she was most afraid, she reached for help. Then, little by little, she learned that her voice mattered. That fear was not weakness, that leaving what harmed her was not failure. And when love finally found her, it did not ask her to become smaller. It did not tell her she was too emotional, too difficult, too much. It stood beside her, it took her hand, and it said, "May I?"